And we're back. So Adam, it seems like you might be the only one bringing some new IP to this party.
Well, yeah, Steph, it does seem to be that way. You see, Dishonored has a lot going for it. Great atmosphere, decent story. The combat's not bad either. But you see, it's not all gravy. As good as it is, it could be a bit better.
So that you could remain near. But there is no one else. And the Spy Master was right to insist that I send you.
Dishonored is the new stealth action game brought to you by Bethesda, following the story of Corvo, the ceaselessly badass protector of the Empress of Dunwall. Corvo is quickly thrown under the bus after he returns home from a political voyage to find aid for Dunwall as he is framed for the assassination of the Empress, and so your quest to get revenge and find out the truth begins.
You'll know what to do, won't you? Corvo.
Luckily, Corvo has a great number of tools at his disposal, and a bit of magic too. What you use and when you use them is entirely up to you, as well as what you spend the time upgrading. Your Assassin's Blade, crossbow, and other physical tools are largely upgraded via spending money you collect around the world in various forms. Dunwall is in a pretty rough state, as a rat plague has the city in shambles. Most locations you'll visit are run down and void of much life, of any kind. Aside from the rats, of course. This explains why those coils of copper wire and the scrap metal that you find laying around the world suddenly become your currency. Magic, on the other hand, is upgraded using runes, which you find scattered across the world. One of the more useful falls into the same trap that the latest Batman games had with detective mode. Dark vision allows you to see through walls and other objects and reveals the NPC sightlines. This skill is so useful that, like detective mode, you end up leaving it on all the time. And this is kind of unfortunate because the skill yellows the screen and vignetting is used, and what aesthetically pleasing bits of Dunwall exist, you sometimes end up missing. Regardless of which method you choose to get to your objectives in Dishonored, getting from point A to point B is generally pretty fun. You have multiple paths to take to get to your destination, with much of this variation coming from verticality. If you've played any of the Assassin's Creed games, you'll likely feel like you're being ripped off when missing jumps or handholds, but mobility is fluent enough and doesn't get you screwed too often. You can definitely see the puzzle-like setup of the locales as you make your way around, but it's hidden well enough for the most part, and at times you'll feel like you're running the rooftops of a sprawling city. You'll certainly appreciate the great number of ways that you can get to your destination. However, ultimately you are funneled in fairly noticeable ways most of the time. While Corvo has a bevy of methods to dispatch his enemies, direct combat actually feels a bit sluggish despite the quick animations. Most of the killing animations also have the odd feeling of being light and thus not really as weighty as you'd expect. Some of this would be a bit less noticeable if there were more killing animations, but unfortunately the stable is a bit thin given the various ways you can attack a person within the game. There is still satisfaction to be had in combining magic and steel in various ways, and jumping off of a rooftop onto an unsuspecting enemy is always a good time. What helps make the Dishonored experience more varied, however, is the fact that you don't actually have to kill the majority of the enemies you come in contact with. In fact, at the end of each level, you'll find out whether or not you killed any enemies, or if you were even detected. This can be a bit boring, however, for people who want to go the stealth route, as there aren't really that many animations for putting somebody to sleep. If you want to get through the game using this method, get used to seeing the same choke animation and listening to the same sound bit over and over again. The other frustrating thing worth noting for stealth playthroughs is the lengthy waiting time for some of the NPC movement. You'll find yourself sitting for minutes at a time in spots, trying to get a break in sightlines before making your move. It's not frequent, but it's noticeable enough. Something else to keep in mind is the striking lack of feedback given by the UI above the NPC's heads when you're truly spotted. A nice little pop-up telling me that I'd failed the all-stealth requirements for the level would have been ideal, as I found myself reloading many times when I wasn't sure whether or not I'd been spotted. The game world and its inhabitants all look as if they're part of a giant oil painting, but the effect could have probably been a bit more heavy-handed, as sometimes it looks more like a washed-out watercolor. I would assume this is to add to the tone of the world in general, but it doesn't really accomplish this in tandem with its very Fable meets Team Fortress character models and world. The sounds of Dunwall are far more appealing overall. While the voice acting is just this side of acceptable aside from 2 or 3 of the actors, the sounds of the world itself are what really help bring Dunwall to life. The thing that stood out the most to me was the use of dynamic music when an enemy was close or as you snuck up behind them. I believe this to be Dishonored's high point for getting my head in the game, and it is my biggest takeaway as it has done it better than most games I've played in a long while. Dishonored is surprisingly replayable, which is great considering its relatively short length. As mentioned before, every level presents the challenges of either not killing anyone and or not being detected. There are also numerous collectibles that will add to your pocketbook or even your various abilities should you hunt down the many bone charms. As with any game like this, however, replayability ultimately relies on the player's love of the game and how much willingness they have to go back and start all over. Dishonored's story is, for all intents and purposes, a complete mash of ideas that don't ever really seem to come together in any meaningful way. Many characters play seemingly integral roles but aren't really explained to any level of satisfaction. The movement approaches Assassin's Creed without being quite as competent. The combat is a bit bland, and the story beyond the forced exposition in cutscenes and discussions that are delivered in literature and audio logs a la BioShock don't really do nearly as well at fleshing out the world and its inhabitants.
You're a wanted man, so everyone in the city knows your face, but this mask giving you terror to them.
While I had genuine fun with Dishonored in spots, it never really seemed to grab me. It simply feels like a game that tried to accomplish too much without quite having enough time, and definitely needs another game to work out a lot of the kinks. There are certainly some hints of real brilliance in Dishonored. However, it's not exactly an example of a game that's greater than the sum of its parts. If you're chomping at the bit for some stealth action, Dishonored will certainly fit the bill. However, if you can wait just a little bit longer, definitely pick this game up when there's been a price drop.
Well, it seems like we here at the Game Code had a pretty great holiday, and we're hoping you did as well. We're going to spend some more time chatting about some of our favorite games this holiday season, but if you want to tell us what you've been playing over the holidays, hit us up on Twitter at GameCodeTV, as well as on Facebook at facebook.com/GameCodeTV. Thanks for spending time with us. Get back to playing whatever you got for Christmas. We'll see you next time.
Oh yeah, I am a huge Assassin's Creed.